Well, welcome everyone. Thank you all so very much for joining us for this amazing session at the Root, Giving Circles and Structural Change. Just so you know, closed captioning is available and you can enable it at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My name is Taisha, and I am the Director of Engagement at Philanthropy Together. And if you don't know, you should by now know that Philanthropy Together is a global initiative to grow and strengthen the fields of giving circles with programming like We Give Summit. And today we are super excited to examine the different types of giving circles, 501Cs, 501C4s, impacts, and what we all can learn from each other. And I must say that as an activist philanthropist and as someone who is very passionate about voting rights and democracy, I'm excited about this session because I'm a fan and an admirer of the unique work of the States Project and the Movement Voter Project. And I know you will be too following this session. Don't forget that throughout today's session, if you are live tweeting or sharing on social, please use the We Give Summit hashtag, and we encourage you to just hang tight so that we can have a poll following our discussion today. And with that, I am super happy and excited to introduce today's speakers. We have Tobi of the Movement Voter Project, and Melissa Walker of the States Project, who will share why organizing money is a key tool for structural change and how we as Giving Circle members can get involved. Melissa, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Ty, and thanks so much for this wonderful summit. I don't know if anyone had a chance to go to the first couple sessions, but I was listening and loving, and I recognized some names from the chat, so I know some of y'all were there. It's been an awesome day, and we hope to bring that energy into this session as well. So thank you for being here. I'm going to share a little bit about the States Project and my journey with Giving Circles, and then I'll hand things over to Zoe, and then we're going to have a conversation. And we welcome y'all to post in the chat along the way, ask questions, share feelings and stories. We're here for this interaction. So thanks again for being here. My story really starts where I had no idea what Giving Circles were, but in December of 2016, as I felt some urgency ringing in my body about the election that had taken place in November, I heard a New York State Senator speak, and what I heard from him changed the direction of what I was doing with my life, which at the time was writing children's books. I write middle grade and young adult novels. In that room, though, a publishing holiday party in Brooklyn, this state senator started talking about how everything that we were worried about under a Trump presidency and everything that we cared about was actually being decided in state capitals and not in Washington, D.C. So everything from environmental policy to education funding to civil rights to choice to voting rights, the very core of our democracy, all things that I'm sure all these Giving Circles have been working on. All of these things were being controlled in state capitals. And I started to recognize a lot of things that hadn't made sense to me about what was happening in our country. So things like the bathroom bill in my home state of North Carolina. I started to recognize that was lawmakers in Raleigh who did that. I'm not even sure what their names are. And things like the Stand Your Ground gun bill in Tallahassee, which let Trayvon Martin's murderer go free and then passed in 25 other states. And the Flint, Michigan water crisis, I started to realize that's a Lansing problem, not a Washington, D.C. problem. And all of those things had happened under an Obama presidency. So I started to recognize that maybe I'd been looking in the wrong place and recognizing that there were these power centers, state capitals, that had been really organized by radical right forces for a long time. And from 2010 to 2016, we lost nearly 1,000 state legislative seats and radical right-wing majorities took over. And in those states where those majorities took over state houses and state senates, people's lives got bad. They defunded education, put in right to work laws, gutted environmental protections. And when people's lives got bad, they didn't say, oh, that must be Washington, D.C. That must be my state senator. I know who that is, because most people don't know. They said, that's Washington, D.C. I'm going to hit my change button. And little do we know the roots of Trumpism were being seated in state legislatures. So I started to see this power center, and I started to wonder what I could do. The sentence that got my attention and brought me to giving circles was this: it is often cheaper to change the balance of power in a state chamber than it is to win a single competitive congressional seat. Congressional races cost millions and millions of dollars. State legislative races do not. And so I got together with a few other children's book authors, and we formed what we started calling a giving circle, not knowing the history, not knowing the full breadth of what we were entering and walking into happily, but knowing that we thought we could make change. So we got together and we started talking in living rooms and gathering regularly, having sushi and beer, pizza and wine. This was all pre-COVID. And talking about state legislatures and the powers that they could be, talking about how these are meant to be laboratories for democracy. They're meant to be marriage equality, going from state to federal, or healthcare, going from Hawaii to Massachusetts to becoming the ACA. And we were in a giving circle that did not believe that they were meant to be laboratories for voter suppression bills or bans on individual choice or bans on what kids can do. And so we got together and started to focus on state legislatures. And that New York State Senator who I had heard speak in December resigned from the New York State Senate to start the States Project, to focus on state legislatures and analyzing where a shift could happen in the coming election cycles. We got together, and in 2017, we went into Virginia with the States Project to try to help flip the House of Delegates. We supported 10 candidates, 9 of whom won their seats. And the balance of power got so close in Virginia, just 1 seat away from flipping entirely, that the legislature expanded Medicaid and 400,000 people got healthcare who didn't have it before. We felt connected to that policy outcome, and it solidified the annual cadence of our giving circle because we had had a transformational and transparent political giving experience that had real outcomes on people's lives. And we started to realize that this was the structural piece we were looking for when we wanted to look at our democracy. In 2018, I stopped writing children's books and I started talking to other people about forming these political giving circles to focus on these power centers so often overlooked in the mainstream media and by folks who do political giving, but maybe in an emotional way or in a what I see on the news way or in a I'm angry at this one particular person way. And start to think about giving circles, which after all are vehicles for strategic, impactful giving. Bringing that to politics felt very important to us. So helping people form giving circles is what I do at the States Project. And in 2018, I'm just going to tell a couple stories and then I will hand things over. In 2018, we were able to go into North Carolina and help break a supermajority so that Governor Cooper had veto power. That veto power has been incredibly consequential in North Carolina, where radical right-wing forces have been pushing to defund education and control a women's right to choose and many other things. In Arizona, we helped flip 4 seats in the state house to bring Arizona to the closest balance of power since 1966, just 1 seat away from shifting power in the chamber, to a tie, 2 seats away from flipping entirely in both chambers. And we were able to help Maine in 2018 flip a state senate, which led to passage of bills that reflected our values in Augusta. Things like raising teacher pay, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, expanding Medicaid, passing automatic voter registration, banning gay conversion therapy. Those things happened in Maine because of the majority shift. The other piece that I love about working with political giving circles on structural change is that there's a real leveling up of political fluency, understanding that there is not one hero who's going to save us, one candidate who's going to bring us everything, but knowing that this involves building a majority, shifting who has the gavel in a state chamber or in any body that we're talking about, and knowing that that's when policies change and that's when lives improve on a structural level. So Thanks for coming here today. We're going to dig in a little bit more, and I'm going to pass things over to Zoe to talk about the awesome Movement Voter Project.
Oh, thanks, Melissa. And thank you all so much for being here. If you haven't yet, please do share in the chat if you're willing who you are, your location, and what calls you to be here. You know, so many places you could be during this time, and you know, especially since we're virtual. So why are you here? And also, what do you want to get out of this session about structural change and giving circles? So I'll introduce myself. I am Zoe Tobi. I'm the Director of Donor Organizing with Movement Voter Project. And basically what we do is we raise very large amounts of money, and we funnel it to grassroots organizing. We funnel it to community-based organizations with a focus on swing states, on swing districts, on battleground states and areas, and especially communities of color and young people who are often identified as low propensity voters, but are really more like low investment voters and disenfranchised voters. They're the voters that our political system have not invested in, have not supported, and in many cases have actively blocked out from the political apparatus and from the political system. So Movement Voter Project essentially takes money, gives it to these groups that are often, you know, severely underfunded, and gives them the spirit of abundance that's needed to plan long term, to innovate and experiment and make strategic plans with the knowledge that they have the funding to actually pull it off. So I love what we do. The other part of what we do, I'll say, is we're organizing a movement of donors, just like the States Project, just like all the work going on here. We believe that if we want to get to the world we want to see, we are going to need to shift the entire culture of philanthropy and the culture of giving, and structural change is a part of that. So just to give kind of a flavor of it and break up the talking heads, I'm going to show just a short 2-minute video clip, just kind of showing the work of MVP.
Investing in grassroots organizing is really the single most important way to affect elections.
Grassroots groups hold the key to winning elections because they drive turnout better than anybody. If you can turn out enough people, then you can flip the state. That has huge repercussions in the whole country.
When Arizona flipped blue, I felt very good because I heard stories straight from organizers connected to MVP about all of the hard work that they did that led to great results.
All those states that swung blue in 2020 and during the Georgia runoffs, grassroots organizing did that. And MVP funded that. That's what MVP does.
MVP brings together grassroots organizations around the country with elections and social movements so that we can see a progressive country in the future.
You want to elect better people and you want to build power for long term. This is like the one place you go to give your donation.
In 2016 was really a wake-up call. The fact that we could elect somebody like Trump was bad enough, but there have been so many attacks on voting rights. There is a real crisis of democracy.
Instead of getting really, really sad or angry about those things, I try to think about, who are the groups that are doing the things that can counteract that. These are the groups that have long-term relationships. When they knock on the door, the person on the other side is responding to someone that they know, that has been around. That is how you're going to be able to turn people out, because you have such trust that has been built. They are people that can be a force locally, and because MVP supports so many groups, that's a lot of localies.
When voter turnout beats voter suppression, we win.
Donors are fueling our movements. The investments that we make right now in grassroots organizing will help us create a thriving community, thriving schools, neighborhoods, a world for all of us.
Okay, there we go. So just a little taste. Oops, there we go. Okay, great. So I'm going to pause here. Enough about us. We want to hear about you. this session is all about how can we direct giving circles toward creating structural change. And we'd love to know your questions so that we can have a conversation that's really valuable for everyone here. So please share in the chat if you haven't yet. What are your burning questions about giving circles and structural change? And we're going to have a conversation. So we're going to give folks a minute to just think about your question, share it in the chat, and then we'll go on. Imagine that we're all here in this, kind of large living room circle together, even though we're on Zoom, like talking head style. Imagine we're all here together in person. Oh yes, and we will be sharing links as we go, and I'll share the link as well to that video. So take a minute, share your questions in the chat.
As folks are thinking, I also want to lift up Vu from the first session and the things that he talks about, which have inspired me for a very long time. And the idea that there are two things that have to happen at once when we're looking for the transformations that we want to see. And those things relate to the immediate needs of communities, of people in crisis, of what he likes to refer to as houses on fire, which are putting out the fires. And then there's the need to look around and say, who's starting the fires? And how can we shift power structurally so that the fire starters aren't in power anymore? That's not exactly how he says it, but that's how I've interpreted that story. And I think it's an incredibly important piece of the yes and movement. So I saw Kyson asking, how do you define structural change? And I really define it as looking at who's holding power, who's passing laws, who is creating the structure in which we live, and thinking about how can we respond to immediate need and shift that power center. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I love what you just said, Melissa. I think in addition to putting out the burning fires and looking at, who's causing these fires, the part I love in what you say is how do we shift the power sustainably so that in the future, fewer people are starting fires in the first place. And I think that as donors, one of the best things that we can do is look for the groups that not only claim to serve the needs of underrepresented or marginalized communities, but are actually led by leaders who are of those communities, and to avoid just replicating the kind of existing power structures that we're working within.
Absolutely. I see some questions popping up in the chat. So I will answer. I'm going to answer one from Maggie, which is, how do you pick the states you'll focus on in an election cycle? I think we probably have a similar process, but at the States Project, we look at all 99 state chambers. It's 99 because Nebraska is unicameral. It's a good tidbit of trivia for your next dinner party. And we try to figure out where it is possible to shift power in the state capital. So where do we have enough districts that we do a deep analysis district by district to figure out, okay, does this district, where was the last presidential election numbers in this district? Does this district have a representative who does not reflect that vote? Does this district have a representative who does not reflect the vote of the last top performing Democrat at the state level? And we look at a bunch of metrics to figure out where the districts that need to shift are. And we want to make sure that those districts have the support they need to run fully funded campaigns. And that's kind of where we go in. How many seats do we need to shift? How many districts are in play? When the math adds up, we can go in and try to help these districts. And I think that something that Zoe just said sparked something for me that's really important about the work that we're doing, which is the States Project and the giving circles that we work with are there every year. So we're not just there right before November of an election year. We're in Michigan in 2018. We're in Michigan in 2019. We're in Michigan in 2020. We're in Michigan in 2021, because it's incredibly important to build up and strengthen state caucuses, which is the entity in the state that's exclusively focused on state legislatures like we are, and make sure that they have a staff who's on the ground and stays, and that these districts have people going out and touching base with the people in their districts and hearing what they need to hear, so that when a candidate is running, they will be able to know what their district cares about and is thinking about. In Pennsylvania in 2021, we were able to, because of some giving circles who really understood this, help fund a deep canvassing program with the state caucus that went out into districts that we knew would be competitive in 2022 and started listening. They started knocking on all the doors and they started listening to what people were talking about, what people were worried about, whether it was the cracks on their sidewalk, to their kids' school, to healthcare across the state. And that information, when collected on the direct side of the campaign, on the hard side, which is where we work, and I can explain that a little more if folks want, we are able to then transfer that information directly to candidates who emerge from the primaries in those districts, so that they know the doors when they start going out into those districts. That is something that has been impossible in years past in state legislative races, which are often ignored, underfunded. They're not the shiny object races. You may picture congressional races, which often have staff and people all around, offices, and state led races just aren't like that. But they do need that support, and they are incredibly consequential. So being there consistently, regularly, building that infrastructure that people need all the time is incredibly important to connecting with the communities and the voters, which is just, Zoe, you made me think of that.
Oh, I love that. Just to riff off what you're saying, I know I'm guilty of this. Before the 2020 election, I noticed it was for me and for a lot of my friends, we all sort of woke up in July, August, September, some in October, like, oh my gosh, there's an election coming up. And that's when we take all the giving that we had saved up to give, and then we just throw it. We throw it at campaigns, we throw it at organizations that do turnout work. And that doesn't work. Imagine being the executive director of a grassroots organization in North Carolina, and it's October 15th, and you get a huge check for $200,000, and the donor says, we want you to use this to hire a huge team to, swing North Carolina. What are you going to do? You have 3 weeks to vertically scale up your entire operation. So I think, what Melissa's speaking to, and what Movement Voter Project does also, is we really emphasize that importance of early investment and giving the groups on the ground the certainty that they can plan truly the strategy that's going to win, not just 1 month from now or one cycle from now, but long term. So yeah, I love that piece. Early investment. Also, just want to highlight, Maggie, you had asked, how do you pick the states? I'm just going to share Movement Voter Project's targeting methodology, so you can look at it in more depth. We wanted to talk about, Ellen, you bring up, your giving circle is not political. We wanted to bring up this question of, what is the role of charitable or nonpartisan giving in structural change? And I would say that there is a role. There's partisan dollars that you can give that directly affect particular candidates or parties. But when you're talking about nonpartisan dollars, you're talking about long-term base building. Grassroots organizations can use nonpartisan funding to register voters, to build relationships that last for the long haul. So that kind of work is essential as well. And just for a taste of what even nonpartisan, non-political giving can do. For an example, one of our partners in Arizona actually stopped over 50, basically like anti-democracy bills in that state. And we're able to register almost 3,500 voters last year with nonpartisan dollars. So, this is huge. Our coalition in Pennsylvania, led by Pennsylvania Vote, they won reforms to the census process that led to a much more racially fair map for state legislatures. So that's nonpartisan activity, nonpartisan dollars. So there is a huge role. On one hand, I think we'd like to say, please make all of your giving partisan, make it all political, please. And yet on the other hand, we know that the system we have right now, there's incentives when it comes to nonpartisan giving. And please just know that makes a huge difference as well. So I'll pause there and we're going to look at the questions. Over to you, Melissa.
Yeah, no, I will say the States Project is nonpartisan, actually, which may surprise you after I spoke, but we are committed to electing majorities who are focused on improving people's lives. That can change over time. Currently, our values align in a certain way. We are in Alaska, actually. We were in Alaska in 2020 to help defend a bipartisan coalition who stands against a right-wing governor who wants to defund education. And sorry, I live on a firehouse block.
Perks of having a virtual conference.
I'm really bringing Vu's metaphor to life here. So we were in Alaska in 2020 to defend a bipartisan coalition that stands against a right-wing governor who wants to do things that would damage the state. And so just to mention that, I also hear that giving circles sometimes just don't want to be political. And I would posit or be curious about like how the issues that giving circles do care about are often so political. I think about, uplifting communities and providing access to education and all of these things that we're working on as giving circles, I think really, really relate to the laws of our country and the values of the people who hold political majorities in our country. And so that piece is a layer of it. And I think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I loved the question from somebody who had written, how do you approach a conversation or begin the conversation in a circle that involves people at all points on the political spectrum? If it were me, I would ask the question, like, what is the change that you are looking to create in the world? What do you want to see present in the world that isn't present now? And then, okay, so how do we get there? What's the means by which we, create that change? And almost inevitably, it's going to come down to policy. And it's going to come down to, not necessarily a candidate or a party, but it is political. And just being willing to have that conversation. I'd actually love to hear from the group. Has anybody had success in having these kinds of conversations with someone who starts here and then maybe moves here because they have like a political aha moment? Has that happened for anybody? And please come off mute, share out loud, or share in the chat. Let's see, Colleen says, we have had aha moments where we realize despite political differences, we agree on high level goals. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, Colleen, is the idea that I think we can perhaps still safely start from is, again, one that came up in the first session, the idea of democracy. And that as a piece of common ground feels like a starting point. And I think that there is a lot of room for exploring, what's happening to our democracy and where to look to shore up the democracy. And I think, our work is so focused on state legislatures because we see that there has been so much focus at the top on the White House and on Washington, D.C., that we have really ignored these structural foundations of democracy in the states, which is how our country was built. It was built with 50 state governments, all of whom have a governor and a state house and a state senate, and all of whom are making laws that are responsive to federal law, yes, but that also are really deciding the lives of the people in their states and affecting our entire country. And I think the idea of democracy is one where we can find a lot of common ground and find ways to plug in to help strengthen our democracy. I think that's one place to start, which in a place that I know can be uncomfortable when everything is as heated as it is now.
I'll add to that. Personally, I'm realizing I'm in an interesting situation now where very close members of my family are on a very different end of the political spectrum than I am. And I notice having the conversations, when we have the conversation at the level of, which party is better, which candidates or elected officials are better, it's very unproductive. And one thing that I've loved is, taking the example from the Movement Voter Project model, we can instead say, well, okay, what if we just, put that to the side for a moment and looked at what are the organizations that represent the needs on the ground of people who, whose lives ultimately we want to support their ability to improve, their own ability to improve their own lives. What if we say, okay, are we willing to trust in communities' abilities to design their own strategies, to solve their own problems? And sometimes those strategies do dovetail with politics, but oftentimes it has a lot to do with mutual aid. The issues of the day that I know we could speak to so many of them really do have to do with communities working together, coming together, putting their own assets and resources together to support each other. And then that often does, translate into organizing and advocacy and get out the vote work, because they see, oh, this is a part of the equation. So it doesn't have to be the full equation, but it's part of it. Miranda, I'm just reading your question. How do 501c3s balance the factor of not crossing the line between advocacy and lobbying while still carrying out this philosophy? My joke answer is get a good lawyer. My non-joke answer is look for the organizations that are 501c3, but they're talking about what's it really going to take to create a vibrant, multiracial democracy where everyone can thrive. That is language that is nonpartisan. That's language that is C3 fundable. And the activity that goes on, by those groups make structural change. And it right now, it is a part of the equation. We're just reading more of your questions. Melissa, I'm going to give the mic to you next.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you a question.
Oh, please.
I would love to just ask you to share like an example or a story of what structural change has looked like in MVP's experience. Like, do you have a story, an example, or a couple about, what that looks like so that people can really see it, hear it, smell it, breathe it?
Yeah, one of the ones that really moves me the most is the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition in Florida, which was started by a formerly incarcerated person who got out of prison and saw, oh my gosh, people in my situation can't vote. It's like their franchise has been taken away permanently. And they led the Free the Vote campaign that has helped tens of thousands of people vote for the first time who otherwise would not have. And for those who, for whom this is just a human rights and democracy issue, we can say, don't you want more people to be able to vote versus less? And for those for whom, maybe this is a political issue, we could say, whether this affects elections this cycle or in 2 cycles or 3 cycles, this is huge. This is the kind of long-term structural change that is going to make life better for everyone, because now we have a more representative democracy than we would have. So that kind of work to me is just, it's some of the most inspiring, and it makes me want to support it with everything that I can. Let me see what Nina says. How about how to start the conversation that advocacy really is a necessary function for a nonprofit? Should be part of their PR messaging, don't you think? Yeah. In one sense, I would say organizations need the funding. They need unprecedented funding to be able to tell that story and advocate in the ways that they haven't been able to before. Oh, and I love what Maggie's saying about Medicaid funding. Yep. Yeah. Melissa, to you, I have a question also. I think some of the hesitancy around funding PACs is political action committees kind of have a bad rep. Like, these are like the dark money organizations that keep us up at night, that are, billionaires scheming to control everything. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is certainly what I thought PACs were, and they can be. We at the States Project, our PAC is called the PAC for America's Future, and our giving circles are doing PAC giving. We are a people-focused PAC, funded by individuals and people, so not corporations, and fully publicly disclosed, so not dark money. And there are a lot of PACs, which stands for Political Action Committee, who are out there doing good work in the light. So it shouldn't always be something for folks to run away from, but just something for folks to investigate and see what work is being done and who is funding. People funded PACs are a good thing.
People funded PACs. I think for anybody who's interested in directing their giving circle toward that sort of activity, I think that's a great framing that you can bring to your folks. There's the evil PACs, and then there's the people funded people powered PACs.
Absolutely. And I think people PACs are really what they're doing is using legal structures to shift the balance of power, and that shift is important and essential. And something I think that might also be common ground is that I think probably most of us would like to get money out of politics. I'm making an assumption, but I'll just say it. So that is something that is absolutely necessary for structural change. And it will not happen until we elect majorities who will make laws that get money out of politics. And that is something that, right now, in order to elect those majorities, we have to put money into politics and, show up at the levels that honestly, corporations and the Kochs and folks who have a very vested, stake in getting a return on investment for their political investments with tax breaks and deregulation in states where their corporations might live. We have to push back on that. And they may have more concentrated wealth. I think that there's an argument to be said that we have more people, and giving circles are about collective giving, and coming together to push back on that is possible. And it gives me a lot of hope, like I said earlier, to work at the state legislative level, where it is not millions and millions of dollars that changes this, but it is a return on investment that is, I will say it again, it is often cheaper to change the balance of power in a state chamber than it is to win a single competitive congressional seat. The closest race we ever worked on was in 2019, when we supported a candidate named Hester Jackson McCrae, who was running in Mississippi. And she had run so that was 2019, she had run in 2015. Mississippi has state elections every 4 years on odd years, voter suppression tactic. But she had run in 2015 and her campaign filings showed a total of $839. We worked with a bunch of giving circles and put around $80,000 into her district. She won the district by 14 votes and became the only Black woman in Mississippi to represent a majority white district. Those things matter. 14 votes. That's a field team staffer. That's, a mailer. That's Hester Jackson McCrae not having to have more dial for dollar times, but instead having more out in the community time to meet her voters. And that's the kind of change that we're really looking for. So I just share that story to say, I think people think that it's almost impossible to impact political races, and it's not.
Oh, great. So just looking through the rest of the comments here, it's just a sec. Oh, Kyson, you asked this great question. How should giving circles think about putting plans in place to do this type of work? Melissa, I'll look forward to your thoughts on this. I think if it were me, I would get the group together and look at what's the change that we'd like to see through our giving by the end of this year, and or the next 12 months, and then really just have a frank conversation. Where can our dollars do the most good? And you might bring up, okay, yes, there's going to be a role for funding efforts to put out the fires. We need to put out some fires, and then let's make sure there's some portion that goes into making sure fewer fires exist in the future. And here's some ways that we can do that. That's what I would say. Melissa, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that yes and approach. And I think, some folks are probably there and say like, yes, I think a giving circle doing a political engagement sounds like a great idea. And some folks are like, not my group. And I think there's a space for both of those things. And in that space is curiosity and exploration and questions, like Zoe said, around the changes that you want to see, and expanding the vision beyond one cause at a time to a change that may impact 100 organizations. When laws change, there is huge impact across a sector. So just thinking about that and taking a step back and asking questions around it, I think is an amazing place to start. And in terms of, if folks say, I'd like to do this, we'd like to do a year where we do some advocacy and some political engagement. I will say that the as I talked about earlier, the early money is the money that builds in politics. And we actually cut our giving circles off on October 3rd for the current election cycle, which pains me as a fundraiser because so much political money comes in October and November, right before an election. But again, like Zoe said, that's the kind of money that's kind of reactive and emotional and doesn't quite build. And it's harder to spend. And our political team has been devoted to evidence-based tactics and best practices and really the money that builds and the money that's strategic. So what we do is that if folks give after October 3rd, it goes into the next election cycle. Little do they know that that October 4th donation is the smartest donation they can make for 2023 in states, potentially Mississippi, Virginia, which has odd year elections, Louisiana has odd year elections. So there's a cycle to it. But the earlier money is the money that builds, and that's a time to jump in and think about the next year, because we are playing a long game. And, I know that people feel a kind of way about politics, but we are on the edge of losing our democracy. And I really feel like we can have common ground to bring ourselves back from that brink, and find that space in the middle where we believe in each other and where we lift each other up. And giving circles are the perfect environment, especially giving circles with different ideologies are the perfect environment to explore that common ground and find ways to engage it structurally. What are the structural things that we need to ensure our democracy? I think we would all say when everyone can vote is a good thing. Registering voters is a good thing. More people participating is a good thing. And there's space for those things, and they are hugely related to structural change.
I'll just add one note in closing that for me really gets to the heart of why I do this work, and I think what I want to leave the group with. My daughter's 2.5. You might actually hear her in the background. She's fighting a nap right now. I work from home. But when she was born, I remember holding her in my hand, putting her to sleep, and thinking, I literally have the future in my hand right now. I literally have the future. And the question came to me, what can I do now so that when I'm talking with her decades from now about what I did to create the best world possible for her, that I can have no regrets when I have that conversation. And it's actually what set me on the path from being a professional leadership coach to deciding to become directly involved in the Work with Move and Voter project. I asked myself, what can I do now so that I wake up after the next election, the morning after, a decade from now, with no regrets? So I want to invite everyone here to ask themselves some form of that question. What might I do so that I can wake up the morning after the next election with no regrets? I know that's not how I felt the morning after the 2016 election, the 2000 election. Maybe some of you resonate with that. And you have a voice of wisdom that can guide you if you ask yourself that kind of question and follow where it takes you. Just tap into your courage to follow where it takes you. And when it comes to your giving circles, just say what you see. Say what you see as a way to start the conversation and invite others to tap into, really their intention and their value for the world they want to see. So that's what I got. Melissa, anything you want to add in closing?
Oh boy, I don't think I can do any better than that. Let's let Zoe close it out and I'll hand it back to Ty. Thank you all so much for being here with us. We are here for questions, comments, challenges, anything. So come talk to us. I think we're going to put, we put a feedback form in the chat. So you can share on that with us and we would love to hear your thoughts.
This is so good. So good. Thank you all so much. And Zoe, Melissa, thank y'all for really anchoring us, centering us on how we can show up and lean into our role as citizens in this democracy, in this awesome democracy that, to your point, is at risk. So we all have a role to play in this. And so I I heard you loud and clear, and I hope you all really took that in, and just for us to just have some valuable insights on our role as Giving Circle members in structural change. So before we wrap up, we would like to go ahead and send out the poll. The poll is gonna launch here. We have 2 short questions, y'all, to give us some feedback on this session, which was fantastic, seriously. So Melissa, thank y'all so much for your insight. Also, to all of you like me that really want to go back and unpack this, just know that all of the recordings of today's sessions will be available to you over the next coming days. So please sit with it, digest it, share it with your members and people. In terms of next steps, y'all, so next up, we're actually going to take a break from some of our discussions and our learning for a little bit of fun. And so I hope you all will come join us. Let's share, let's connect over our speed networking, which starts at 1 o'clock. So we have about 7 minutes. You can go grab you something to drink or something, and then be prepared to come join us for speed networking so that we can connect and get to know each other a little bit better. After speed networking, we also encourage y'all to head on over to the exhibitor section to explore some Giving Circle networks and some technology platforms and so much more. We have a lot of good resources there that can kind of help you to start and strengthen your work with Giving Circles. And so again, thank you all. I'll see you over at Speed Networking, and then our next main session will take place at 2 p.m. where our friends at Philanos will have a session about financial sustainability for Giving Circles and how building viable options in terms of like the membership dues or whatnot. So we'll see you at Speed Networking and back for the main sessions at 2 o'clock, and I will see you around.